will say that when she'd like, to open it up for discussions. Yeah, so over to you, Sanndra.
Okay, thank you, Reese. Well, I don't know. I know some of you. I'm Sanndra Templar, and I'm retired. And I'm just going to talk about my travels, and I'm going to go in to share the screen while I talk about it. So I think they can still see me, can't they?
Yes, on the side.
Yeah, so just getting into that so I can put the post. So just bear with me for a second. So can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. So I just want to talk about traveling around the world without flying. I used, and the good, the bad, and the ugly of that really. I travelled extensively in Australia, but I didn't go overseas at all until I was 61. For a lot, I didn't really have much motivation to go. For most of my life, I didn't have the money, but then I didn't really have a strong motivation, which obviously you find the money. I don't fly. I have flown a lot in Australia previous, but I haven't flown for about over 10 years. So when my sister decided to have her birthday in Italy, and I really sort of wanted to go, I decided I'd find a way to get there without flying. So I looked into this website. Is called The Man in Seat 61, and he doesn't fly, and he's actually made, I think, quite a bit of money out of telling people how to travel around the world without flying. Of course, the hardest place to get out of without doing that is Australia, because of that bit of water. So we didn't have much choice. You really have two choices. You can go on a cruise boat or you can go on a freighter. There aren't really any like passenger ships. So we decided we would go on a cruise, and that's what we did. And there were things we loved about it and things we hated. I think they were quite small boats that we went on. We haven't been on any of those mega ones. I liked the fact that it was a good way to travel because it was slow. You got a real understanding of the size of the world. It was very relaxing. You only had to unpack once. It was a 6-week voyage to Europe, and that was my first experience of cruising. I've never been on a boat before, and I was a bit worried I'd get seasick, but I never have a major problem with it. We met lots of people, and of course we got to go to places we never would have flown to ever. And there were lots of, another bonus about it, of course, is you can bring back almost as much luggage as you want. Don't take it there though, because you do have to get off at the other end, and then you've got to catch a train, which I did have a little bit of a problem with that on my first trip, but I learnt my lesson. It's not all fine dining and fancy eating and dressing up. I mean, it's just nice to be able to have lunch or a meal on the deck of the ship on a nice sunny day. There are lots of nice things that you can actually do on the boat. We were on the boat for 6 weeks. This was on another cruise, not the first one, but they have lots of activities, and they did a pantomime, and I was in the pantomime, and it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which you can probably guess. And that was a lot of fun, and meeting people from all over the world. They also had a choir, and we sang on Valentine's Day. And so you spend, as I said, you're on there for 6 weeks. We went to art classes. They had lots of, they had a writing group, which I really enjoyed on 2 of the cruises that I went on. So lots to do. Some of the highlights, I suppose, in a way, were going through the Suez Canal. And that took, I think, all day, and we had a balcony, so it was quite lovely. And arriving in Athens at dawn. And Anzac Cove, we went to Anzac Cove, and it's so small. I was really surprised how small it was, and there was a service on the ship, Princess Cruises, and, you know, it was, there were trying to think, 900 passengers on that first cruise that we went to Europe on. So not very big. The second one we went to Europe on was the same size as the Spirit. So not quite, and the Panama Canal, which with all the locks was quite interesting. You can just ask questions if you want. The locks were very, yeah, it was, I didn't realise there were so many locks on the Panama Canal, and I didn't realise how many people died building it. Hundreds. I think I might have been, I better not quote it because I might get it wrong, 100 or 500 for each kilometre. Like lots of
some absurd number, wasn't it? Because they all got, not only did they get crushed and injured there, but they all got malaria or something as well. Yeah.
And the doctors didn't understand what was causing the malaria, and they actually put the bed's legs in pots of water to keep things from crawling up. And of course, mosquitoes breed in water, so they didn't have much understanding of the Panama Canal. So, yeah, any questions about?
Yeah, Sanndra, how long does it take the lock to fill? When you pull the ship into the lock and shut the gate, roughly what sort of time are we talking about?
I think about half an hour, Cole.
Oh, yeah. And it's fresh water, apparently. They let fresh water out of dams up in the mountains.
Oh, do they?
Up the locks, yeah.
Oh.
Which is pretty tricky, which is why they didn't have the transfer of marine creatures from the Atlantic to the Pacific like they did with Suez, which is at sea level, if that makes sense.
Quite an amazing feat of engineering to build it, really.
Did you,
sorry?
Sanndra, did you notice the word's gone, porpoises in the canal?
No, we didn't see
in and out and through the locks?
We looked out for them, but we didn't see them. Have you seen them?
Yes,
yet?
gorgeous.
Yeah. I should say that probably most of you are much more widely travelled than I am. So, you know, I haven't really travelled, as I said, not that much. The bad thing about cruising is the staff working conditions. They are all people from third world, you know, lower socioeconomic countries. They work extremely long hours. They don't have any union rights or working conditions. They're not protected. I mean, they work for 9 months non-stop. Some of the staff, they don't have a single day off. So that I found that a little bit difficult. I guess the casinos that are on some of the boats, they weren't on all the ones we went on, the sales push to buy things, and there's a lot of traps on there for spending money if you're not careful. The food, I didn't think the food was that great because it's not really fresh, and I missed my home food and, you know, organic vegetables and things. And you only usually get 1 day in port. So a couple of ports we stayed overnight in, probably about 5 times, but it's not really quite long enough. Some of the ugly aspects, I guess, are some of the passengers who are very disrespectful of people's cultures and the places they visit, I found.
What do you mean by that? They just sort of drove roughshod over everything, or?
They don't, yes, and they expect places to be, to suit them. Do you know what I mean? They don't want to be flexible or adapt to, you know, what is happening in that particular country or the culture of those people.
Uh-huh.
Arrogant. It's a form of arrogance, probably?
Oh, yes. Yep.
And also, of course, those giant cruise ships, which I think are terrible. You know, there's 5,000 people on some of those boats and more. And in some ports like Dubrovnik, you know, you could get 3 of those in a day, you know, and the guy we had, taxi driver said, like, it just completely swamps the town, you know, and that it's not that much fun to visit when there's that many people there at once. And because it's very, you know, intensive, like they're all there at once.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a bad, you know, for me, not a positive thing. We have looked into the freighter as a form of travelling, but it's not much cheaper, and we probably will do it, but they aren't actually very stable, not as stable, because these are designed for passengers. So I'm not sure how we go in rough seas. That'll be my only, my only misgiving. I wouldn't miss the activities or any of that. I mean, I'm quite happy to amuse myself. But the one thing that was interesting was going to islands that we wouldn't normally have flown to. So the first one I want to talk about is the Portuguese Azores and the island of San Miguel. Were there any other questions before I move on? Particularly about cruising or anything?
Just one comment. There was a very interesting program on the ABC recently that was an analysis of the cruise ship industry. And one of the things that they said was, just as you've mentioned, Sanndra, the traps for young players or old players from cruise ships is the reason why discounts and other offers are made is because they make an enormous profit from the on-ship sales, the tours, everything is ramped up in terms of return on investment, and particularly the casinos. So it's a money, once you're on board, you're churning the money.
Yeah, well, we don't use the casino. And
but just in terms of the
I know.
cruise ship industry, they want you on board because that's where they get their money, the actual.
Well, I think one couple told us they were spending $1,000 a week on drinks.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. It was in the Fin Review, and the owner of the Princess line and that Ruby, all those ships that have been so infamous, he's actually bought more shares in his shipping line, so he's a very large shareholder. I think it's based in Barbados, but it's mainly housed in Miami or down the southern part of USA. But he says it's just going to surge again because it's actually effectively, once they've got them in there, as it's been pointed out, they can virtually milk them for everything. That's why you're getting such short stays off the ship. And they take probably 200% of the cost of the trip that you've paid for your day trip. It's not going to the person who's driving you around, it's going to the ship.
Yeah.
And you might be interested to know that the woman that heads all of the cruising, because she came and spoke to a tourism development program I did in Smithton, the woman that heads all of that industry is based in Hobart. She's an Australian woman.
Oh.
And I pointed out to her that one of the big disadvantages of these ships is they're still burning bunker oil, and there's no laws enforcing them to burn cleaner, less polluting oil because it's heavy in sulfides. And places like Hobart and Burnie and Glebe, where they pull in around in Sydney, getting covered with this filthy patina of black oil. And that is another hidden cost to the hosting community of these ships coming in, apart from the allergies and all the other illnesses that come from burning that fuel close to where people live.
Yes, I think there's a few down negatives. We don't actually very rarely take the ship tours because they are expensive, and you're right, the money doesn't go to local people, but you can get around most of those things. Anyway, we went to San Miguel in the Azores, which is situated off Portugal, and it is a Portuguese territory. It's one of 9 islands. It's an autonomous region.
So how far is that, Sanndra? Do you know the distance from?
Sorry, I don't, but I know that you can fly to New York or Europe just with a reasonably short flight, like it's situated sort of between.
Righto.
So I'm sorry, I don't know how far that is.
That's all right, I just wondered.
Yes. It's a volcanic island with 3 large calderas surrounding picturesque lakes and the occasional steaming, bubbling pool. It's very green with beautiful fishing waters. It's got a mild climate all year, beautiful beaches, natural thermal pools, and with both New York and Europe only a short flight away, I think it would be quite a nice place to live. They make beautiful cheese there, and of course the Portuguese culture and food, beautiful, simply cooked seafood. We hired a car and we drove up to Seta Cadadas to the Twin Lakes. The story of these lakes is that they are the tears of a local legend, is that they are the tears of 2 separated lovers. And on a really fine day, one is blue and one is green to match their eyes, but it was overcast, as you can see, and they were both grey. Very pretty. I did a Photoshop to see what they might look like. It's quite badly Photoshopped, but I'd love to see it if they really were that colour. We continued on back down along the north coast through little villages with basalt houses. They're painted mostly white with red tiled roofs. And each village has a cute black and white church. And
Why black and white?
yeah, I know that the town, they were very black and white, and I'm not really sure why. There were basalt stone fences edging the green fields, and of course there were lots of Frisian dairy cows. Mottled plane trees formed avenues on the roadways, and there were lots of lookouts with fabulous views of green tabletop basalt cliffs. And the whole island is covered in hydrangea hedges. Unfortunately, it was winter, so they weren't in bloom, but I reckon they'd look, as you can see here, they'd look pretty stunning when they were all out. They're not native to the area. There was one that was blooming. Some of the cows being led along the road. And this man was going along the road on his horse with milk can on the back. So our next stop was at some of these. This reminded me of Tasmania here. With that, like Table Cape, and that are really very similar.
So the soil, if it's volcanic, the soil's really rich, I gather, then, just like here.
Yeah, and it's a dairying region, so it's sort of similar. It has a warm, temperate climate, I think. I think it would be a nice climate, although when we were there it was raining, but it wasn't really cold. Then we went to a tea plantation where you could get a bottomless cup of tea, and we had a tasty beef empanada and a quick look at the tea growing and the processing of tea. They're so neatly cut.
Hooray! I made it.
Oh, right, Anne.
Sorry.
And then we went to the Furnace Valley for a swim because we were told there were thermal pools there, and we wanted to see the 200-year-old Terra Nostra Gardens. The gardens had featured this bubbling lake. Now, I'm not sure how those bright orange ducks survived that hot water because it's very hot, but they are actually putting their heads under. And Cole, you might know what sort of ducks they are. But
No, I don't, Sandra. I think they're a kind of goose, but I'm not sure. You're a bit out of my territory in the Northern Hemisphere.
Right. Now, the gardens had a magnificent gum tree, and we had, like ships stopped there, early explorers and people travelling south, so they would bring exotic species. Now, they're privately owned, the gardens, and they've been developed by 3 family owners with these species from all over the world. It's just so green there. I think they must get a high rainfall. The pool was bright orange and a little off-putting because it looked like a vat of acid, really. But it was warm, and I'm sure it was therapeutic. Stained our bathers orange, which eventually came out. But there were some other clearer pools in little alcoves surrounded by vegetation, and they were very nice. So we stayed there quite a while, just laying about and in the steaming pools. And then we went further up the valley where there were much hotter pools, and they smelt really strongly of sulphur. And the steam was sometimes just coming out of the ground in places. I guess you just adjust to the smell after a while.
Sanndra, Joe here. Has there been any recent volcanic activity on the island?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
With events like that, do you think it must be on the cards at some stage?
Yes. I'm not really sure about the biblical cardboard cutouts that were dotted about the place, but I can only say it was January and perhaps they were left over from Christmas. But there were quite a few of these around that area. We bought some cheese from a roadside stall, and we'd already purchased some tea. Now, on this particular cruise boat, we had a kettle in our cabin, which is really rare, and so we could make tea when we wanted to, which was great. And we took, on our way back down to the Porto Delgado, we took a detour. It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yeah.
A detour into a waterfall and a beach. It was getting dusk by this time. There's the waterfall.
Gee, it is very lush, isn't it?
It's very lush. And now some of you might know, but there was apparently quite a unique Melanesian forest there. Does anyone know about that? I don't know a lot about it, but I looked it up. It had very unusual trees that I hadn't really seen before, and it was said it was a rare pocket of Melanesian forest.
Wow.
This is Porto Delgado, and it's very pretty with its 17th century buildings around the square. They're lit up in the evening. I mean, I really loved Portugal, where haven't been there a lot, but the times I've been there, the people were really friendly. The seafood is delicious, and San Miguel was no exception. We had a beautiful fresh seafood dinner, cooked simply and perfectly with steamed veg, and we got back on the boat about 7:30 that evening. Now, we could have eaten on the ship for nothing, but to my mind, part of a place and understanding its culture is understanding and tasting and enjoying the food. And so that, for me, is something we try to always do. They were our purchases. We bought some cheese and tea and a few other goodies. So any questions about the Azores? Or comment?
How long did you have there, Sandra? Just the one day?
Just the one day.
And how much of the island did you cover in that one day?
Well, we went up one coast, and I don't think we totally circumnavigated. I think we went up and up into the mountains and back down around another coast.
Okay. Yes, Anne.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but since I wasn't here in the beginning, where is that all?
Sorry, it's off the coast of Portugal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
The only way to get there, yes, Stephen.
Presumably you can fly there. You can get there other ways. Is this the only way you can get there?
No, you can fly. Yeah, it's a popular holiday. It has beautiful beaches. The guy we hired the hire car off told us that, you know, we need to come back because there's so much to do, and there would be, and beautiful beaches. I think it'd be a great place for a holiday.
And Kathy's just asked, are there any snakes there?
I don't know.
Do you think you could take a boat from Portugal, like a ferry?
No, it's a bit far for a ferry. I did ask them that. I think you have to fly. I don't think there's a ferry there. There might be freight ships that take, you know, regularly drop cargo off there, but I don't know about that either.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Now the next island we went to, we went here on the way home on our last trip to Barbados. And Barbados is warm, obviously, in the Caribbean. It has I should have mentioned that the Azores has a population of 137,000 people. and Barbados is 287,000. Not that big, really. So it's in the Caribbean, and as early as 1511, the island was referred to as the Isla de los Barbados, Island of the Bearded Ones. But it didn't refer to the people, it referred to a tree, a bearded fig tree. I'll probably say this wrong, Ficus citrifolia, which is indigenous to the island and has long beards hanging down. I saw one of these in the gardens of the plantation house, but I can't find my photo of it, so I'm sorry about that. They speak English. It's a British territory, although it's independent now. The British took over the island in 1620 and brought slaves there to work the sugar plantations. The first democratic parliament was elected as early as 1639, but only about 70% of the population were, 70% of the population were excluded from voting. Slavery was not abolished till the 1830s, so quite late. And Barbados became independent from Britain in 1966. The heroes of that fight for independence and freedom are celebrated in the capital, Bridgetown, which is where we were in port. I was reminded while I was here of the Wilberforce Museum I visited in Hull and the 400 years of slavery that built Britain's wealth, particularly in sugar. The people speak Bajan, combination of English and West African, which is a unique vocabulary and speech pattern, not easy to understand, but everybody we met did also speak English. That vegetable market, once again we hired a car. I think we had to wait for the man to come and open up the hire car place to get the car. It was all very casual and laid back, and drove up to Speightstown where this market was. And on this occasion, we did actually circumnavigate the island. So Speightstown, first of all in Bridgetown, we drove past a lot of resorts and holiday places until we got to this town, which was a colourful town where there were lots of local vegetable stalls and things. It's very brightly coloured. There was an election on as well. Very brightly coloured place. Berger Paints have actually sponsored all the bus stops, and all the houses seem to be painted with very bright colours. So after what you take away in colour-wise from the Azores is black and white, and from here, just lots of bright colours. Schooling is compulsory, and the school uniforms were also quite brightly coloured. There wasn't much forest left on the island, but we did see some monkeys on our way back to Bridgetown. They're beautiful colours, aren't they?
Mm.
Not all of them. So we drove through sugarcane fields and then down the east coast. Now this is the surfing coast, and we bought some coconuts from a roadside wheelbarrow. Were very nice. And then we went on to Oysters, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, where we had a swim and a nice lunch and some rum punch, of course. We had a flat tyre as well in the hire car, so I had to change that after lunch before we could get going again. We went to visit the Plantation House Museum. Oh, there he is, changing the tyre. I forgot I put that in. And that's the Plantation House Museum. I guess there were quite a lot of those houses. It's quite beautiful inside, of course. Very opulent, I suppose. And the thing that Barbados is famous for is rum. And there's 1,000 rum shops on the island. And when you think you can drive around the whole island in a day, that's a lot of rum shops, really.
Not if you stop at too many of them. Yeah.
I bought a bottle of spiced rum for one of my sons, and he hasn't been able to replicate it or buy it anywhere else, and he loved it a lot. they're coloured wooden shacks where you can get a drink and a snack. We didn't visit one because of our time constraints, and also we were driving. But it would be a great way to meet the locals, and if you're staying there. We did have some rum punch for lunch. Oh, and we had another one when we got back near the port, and we had one at this bar. So we had a good day. We dropped the car off. Fortunately, it was quite near the port where the high car place was. Once again, one day was not really long enough to get, you only got a brief taste of a place. I reckon there's a lot to explore and do there. We were going to ride bikes, but we did read that the road, it's a little dangerous on the roads with the traffic, so we decided against it. Anyway,
Which side of the road did they drive on, Sandy?
same as England.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. On our way to Europe, the last time we went in a small boat the size of the Spirit, we went to St. Helena. We were so excited about this. Now this is population between 4,000 and 6,000, it seems, depending on what you read. And it's a rock really in the middle of nowhere, in the South Atlantic, used really. It's one of the most isolated islands in the world.
What size is it, Sanndra?
Pardon?
What size?
Small, but I don't know exactly how big.
Like Bruny Island or what?
Yeah, probably. Now I did know how big it was, but
Is it independent?
it's an English territory. Apparently, Margaret Thatcher. Now I read this. Margaret Thatcher declared them independent because they're quite expensive to keep, I think. But then they declared them not English citizens. Sorry, but then after her, the next Prime Minister said that yes, no, they reversed that decision. So they speak English, and a lot of their young people go out to do extra study in England. And a lot of them actually work on the Falkland Islands, which is interesting, which I guess is close to there, but I can't see it on the map. Now, it was used as a place of exile, of course, for Bahraini princes, Chief Dinizulu from the Zulus, and of course Napoleon after his defeat at Waterloo. He died on the island. Also, about 6,000 prisoners from the Boer War were sent there. The population called themselves saints and are descendants of Europeans, mainly ex-soldiers, Chinese and slaves. The island was originally discovered by the Portuguese. It was an important stopping off place for shipping, but it was founded in 1659 as a British territory. And English is a spoken language. Now, the only way you could get to St. Helena until quite recently was by ship. And they had a freight ship that went to Johannesburg and Cape Town, sorry. Oh, maybe, I can't remember which one. It's 5 days by ship from Cape Town. We stopped off at Namibia on the way, but 5 days you were always 5 days away from anywhere if you lived on St. Helena. They now recently put in an airstrip, so they do have flights and bring in some food and everything's brought in, really. It went twice a week to Johannesburg. There's a plane. Before that, it could only be reached by sea. You really can only comprehend its isolation when you do arrive by sea and do that sort of 5 days from Cape Town. We almost didn't get off because we had to go in by tender, small boats.
Before you do that, can you go back to that first slide? Because I want to ask you a question about those fences on there. Are they rockfall erosion fences?
I think so, to stop it coming down on the road, which runs up here.
Yeah, it must be terribly eroded.
Yeah, well, apparently I read that it used to be a very green island, but it's been completely denuded by, settlement and
Have they got wild goats or something? Is that one of the problems? Or
I think they had goats. They have got a feral cat problem, apparently.
oh,
Yeah. But at last we did get ashore, but we only had half a day here. When it was discovered, it was covered with unique indigenous vegetation, including a remarkable cabbage tree species that's now extinct. It was a dense tropical forest, but the coastal areas were probably also quite green. But the modern landscape's very different, with widespread bare rock in the lower areas, still a bit green and inland, mainly due to introduced vegetation. There's no native land mammals, but cattle, dogs, cats, donkeys, oh yeah, and goats, Reece, you're right. Mice, rabbits, rats and sheep have been introduced, and the native species have been adversely affected as a result. And so there was a dramatic change in the landscape.
so
And
basically the animal weeds have buggered the island.
that's right. So many even of the existing endemic plants are threatened with extinction. They are trying to do something about it now, but probably a bit late. Napoleon's body's been removed to France, but there's still a grave marking the spot where he's buried. And you can also visit the house where he lived, Longwood, but it's been lived in and altered over the years. And it is a house museum. And although you could go there, we decided not to because we didn't have a lot of time, and we sort of decided to wander around in the town instead. The town of Jamestown looks like it's been poured between the cliffs. It's in a long trickle. But we did get a good view of this because we had to land at the cargo port in our tenders, and so we had to drive the road down into it from up here, not down the bottom, so we got a good view. And it was really interesting talking to the people, our drivers on the way, are all locals. Now, I mentioned Napoleon, and I don't know if any of you have read this book, but Thomas Keneally has written a book about Napoleon's years on St. Helena. I've got 3/4 of the way through. It's about Betsy Balcombe, who came to live in Australia and lived there when Napoleon was there. It's an interesting read. And apparently Tom Keneally came across this information in the museum by accident and decided to research it and write the book. This is the main street in Jamestown. The people were really friendly. They chatted to us in the street, happy to talk about the island and their life there. They said a lot of the young people go away. They said a lot of them come back. But there's not a lot of work here. And of course, there's the usual thing going on now with the plane coming in. Do we want tourists or do we not? And half the islanders do and half of the islanders don't. They want to preserve the lifestyle they had. So these, the town's pretty, with Georgian style buildings. We drank the local coffee. Now the coffee is unique to the island. It's brought in from Yemen in 1732 and grown on a small family farm plantation. And their speciality are fish cakes that are made with the fresh tuna that they catch just offshore there. We went to the museum where there were lots of artefacts, artefacts from the Boer War and artefacts made by Boer prisoners. There were some displays of local lace. There was a bit of a lace industry there, brought in and nurtured by a school teacher who came to the island. And we ate some of the fish cakes in this garden under this shady tree, which a man who was told us it was called locally a plum tree, but it wasn't actually a plum tree. I don't know what sort of tree it was. Now this is Jacob's Ladder. And this goes from Jamestown up into the top where there's another settlement. And it's 400 steps and you can walk up it if you want to. We chose not to. But they used to haul cargo up there, and even manure. I don't know why manure, but that's probably what they put on for the farming land up on the top.
Did they have a rig, like they pulled it up with a mechanism, or they carried it up?
I think initially they carried it. I didn't read about or see or hear there anything about a mechanism at the museum, but you would think they would have, wouldn't you, really?
Yeah.
The residents of, that's the plum tree. Anyone know what it is? I looked it up on the internet. I couldn't find anything referred to as a plum tree on St. Helena, so I'm not sure what it is. This is actually the oldest Anglican church in the Southern Hemisphere, and it has that gorgeous spire.
Is that copper or something?
I don't know, maybe. The residents, they have a fishing industry there. They were very proud of their little island, I have to say. They speak very positively about it. There's no, the people we talk to anyway. Any questions?
The fishing industry, did you see the boats in the harbour? Well, that was them we could see in front of the Capitol there, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that the ones you could see back.
They don't have a big population, so do they have a university, or does everybody have to go away to study at uni?
They had a few schools. I don't think they had a university, no. I think they go away to study at that level. I can't see any fishing boats there, Cole, really.
Yeah, cool. That's good.
So obviously they're all pleasure boats there. Do people come in? Are they from Portugal, or where? What's the?
Portugal, Africa. No, I don't know. It didn't feel like there was a lot of holiday accommodation or anything, it just felt like maybe they're locals boats, I don't know.
Okay.
You can't get anywhere on a small boat like that. Like you wouldn't, it's too far away from everything, which is why they put their prisoners there, really. They couldn't really escape. It would have been a daunting experience to be faced with arriving there and knowing you were never going to leave.
Sanndra on some islands.
Yeah. Was that a comment from somebody that I missed?
That's great.
Is Maren joining?
Yeah, hello, Maren.
Hi, yes.
Hi.
On the way to the dentist, yes.
So I feel quite privileged that we had the opportunity to visit there, though, because it's not somewhere I would have even thought about going, but also very difficult to get there. I wouldn't fly there now, obviously, but it is a very dangerous, apparently, airstrip where they drop off over cliffs. So, and it has a lot of crosswind, so the plane can't always land. You can't always get in and out.
Yeah.
They haven't had any cases of COVID-19, but they did have a number of their residents stranded in Johannesburg. They couldn't get home for a while.
Hello, Maren. Maybe mute.
Pardon?
We're hearing your background noise.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thanks.
Very interesting, Sanndra.
Thank you, Cole. Now, the next island was somewhere where I had always wanted to go. So I was pretty excited when I found that this cruise was going there. And this is a French territory, Reunion Island. It's, I think, 2 or 3 calderas as well, and not very big. And it's there off the coast of Africa. It's quite expensive to fly to, because I actually looked into it. Not that I would ever probably have the nerve to do it, but you have to go to Paris first, really, to get a flight there. It's very, very green. We hired a car again, and we drove up these twisty mountain roads up into the hills, and it's all green ravines and waterfalls. Very, very beautiful.
Wow.
It's tropical. I think if you stood still long enough, you get the feeling something would grow over you. Have that feel about it. And the villages are all dotted around the valleys as you drive up. And we drove up to, the population is 859,000.
Oh, crikey.
So double what we have here. We hadn't booked a car for here. We were just hoping to get one. And luckily, when we got there, we found an Avis right near the port. So that was lucky. Gave us a map, were very welcoming, and off we went. Arthur did have to drive on the wrong side of the road. And this was his first experience of that. Good practice for Europe. So he did a good job. We drove up around the coast to Saint Denis and up into the Cirque du Soleil. I don't know if I'm saying that right. The road was narrow, steep and twisty. And Salatsi was settled by runaway slaves, and the name means good camping spot. And there's a large church there, which I'd probably describe as Creole style, if there's such a thing. We proceeded further up the mountain.
I like the way you can see 4 waterfalls there in the background.
I know, they were just everywhere. Oh, I wonder what happened then. It's just changed. There were lookouts along the way where you could see the across the valleys. I don't know why it's gone like that, but anyway.
Sanndra, how did you get there? What size boat were you on at this stage for reunion?
This was the small one. This was the one the size of the Spirit.
Okay.
The very, very small boat. I think there were 600 passengers.
Mm.
And pretty well no frills, Joe.
Yeah.
We had a porthole cabin. There were no balconies. There were no casinos. The captain ate his dinner with everybody, with the passengers. You know, it was a very friendly little ship, actually. I would go again on it if it was still going, but they've taken it out of commission.
Maureen, you had a question?
Oh, I'm just interested to know, this is wonderful going to these islands. How many different trips or how many islands do you get to go to on one cruise ship?
Okay, well, this is 2 trips to Europe, and we came back. We went to Europe on one cruise, then we drove the first time, and then we went on the Queen Mary from London to New York, and then we crossed up and drove up to Canada, crossed Canada, some driving, some on the train. And then we came back through the Pacific. That's the first trip. The second trip in 2018, we went from Fremantle to Reunion and Mauritius and up around Africa to Portugal, where we got off prematurely because it was going to be fairly rough. And as I said, it was a small ship. There was a storm coming, and we were already, as far as I was concerned, we got to Europe when we got to Lisbon. So we got off. And we were over in Europe for a year, and we came back on another boat from the same company, but a bigger one. And we came back through the Panama, whereas we'd been through the Suez on the first trip, around Africa this trip. So we've done sort of different routes.
Fantastic, thank you.
I can't say how many islands each one, because I don't really. We then went down to a place called Elbow, where we had a Creole style plat du jour. I had a chicken curry in a small restaurant called beautiful waterfalls, just everywhere. Couldn't stop taking photos of them, really. So that's the little restaurant. Everything is French, and they did not speak much English at all here at the restaurant. I think maybe the high car place did. The restaurant's called Choo Choo, and Choo Choo is a fruit of the cucurbit family, also known as Christophine or coyote. Is that the same as a choco? I think it is. I think it's the same as our what we call a choco here.
Did it taste like nothing?
We didn't have it, no. But apparently it's well, it's very rich in vitamins, Reese, apparently, from what I read. So, and every part of it's eaten. I think it was pretty well a staple food of the slaves and the people early, you know, the people that lived there. The shoots are prepared like asparagus, which I didn't know that. Well, we had really tasty food and a really nice rosé wine. And then we headed down to find a waterfall for it to have a swim in. I like swimming in waterfalls, if I can find some. So we went down to the coast and once again drove through sugarcane to a place called Saint Suzanne and to this waterfall called Niagara, where I had just a delicious swim. It was so cool, so beautiful. It was quite humid here. We'd been to Mauritius the day before and that was very Indian and quite hot. This was cooler and very French, but I thought it was one of the most beautiful places I'd been. And we really enjoyed our time there and I would love to go back and spend more time, you know, doing some walking in those ravines and just enjoying it. Any questions?
How far is this from West Australia? Do you know? Is it?
A few days. Oh gosh, we left. We were here on the 22nd of March, and I think we left Fremantle early March, or I'd have to look that up. So it's a few weeks, couple of weeks, I think. I think we were at sea without land for well over a week before we got to Mauritius. So I can't remember now. I was glad to get to Mauritius, I know that. Any other questions?
So when you went from Mauritius, did you spend a time on Mauritius and then time on Reunion as well? Or?
We spent a day on Mauritius.
Yes.
And then the next day, the ship travels at night. And
yep.
That day, we spent the day on Reunion.
All right.
And then I think we went to Cape Town or Durban, then
yep.
Cape Town. And we went to Mossel Bay, Namibia, and then St. Helena, I think in that order.
Uh-huh.
Namibia would have been interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very dry country in the south where we were, and it's desert. And we did a trip out into the desert, and we saw this plant, fascinating. Cole, I'll show it to you. 1,000 years old it is, and it grows ugly. Look, it looks like something from space, like a triffid or something. They never have any rain. The whole place survives on moisture in the air. It never rains. And there's like desert to the beach. Fascinating place.
Yeah, cool.
The next place we went to is completely different. And we didn't actually cruise to the Isle of Harris. We actually went there by car. We leased a car when we got to Europe. After we'd been in London, we went to Paris and leased a car for 9 months and drove around, and we ended up driving up to Scotland. So it is not warm, can I say? Not tropical. And this was summer. So I just thought it was lovely. We had, the population's 20,000 people on Harris. And we found it a little bit hard to get accommodation. I didn't realise that So the only thing that was left was this cottage, and I'm really glad that it was the only thing left. We arrived at night and had to find our way to this this cottage. He'd left the light on for us, and he said he'd set the fire. It was on the edge of a loch, and 2 white cottages across the bay were our nearest neighbours. It doesn't look much from the outside. It was an old crofter's cottage, but been remodelled. There were lots of holiday lets on the western side of the island, but this was on the more rugged eastern side, and I thought it was perfect. It had a peat fire, not fancy, but it had a peat fire, very thick stone walls, a fascinating history, and a friendly ghost apparently, which I never saw or heard.
How warm's a peat fire? Does it chuck out much heat, or is it just a little kind of...
Oh, it's quite warm. It smells, I like the smell, but I could understand people who might not, you know, like the smell of it burning, but it is quite strong.
What's the smell of? Earth?
Bit creosote-y, maybe?
Oh, yeah.
Sort of, I thought it was a very, very pretty place again. I think I thought I wanted to live there. There's the peat, and that was the loch we were on the edge of. I liked the fact that it had these little window seats, and you could sit here, and this is where I first spotted the otters. I actually was waiting and watching for otters the whole time we were there, and I thought we were not actually going to see any. So despite a dawn and dusk vigil on my part, we hadn't seen any. But I think we were there a week. There were lots of midges, which don't seem to be repelled by repellent. A Scottish dish that I loved was cullen skink, which is a seafood chowder with potatoes and seafood. I believe it was not always made with milk, but I did have a tasty one in Skye in the old schoolhouse restaurant. It was a hard life for the original crofters here. It was just a beautiful view from that cottage.
Did you swim in the loch, Sanndra, or was it just too cold altogether?
Oh, it was really cold. I mean, I was hoping to get to swim on the western side where the beaches are, but it just wasn't even warm enough for that. They were subsistence farmers, and you can see what the land's like. They grew root crops in lazy beds to cope with the boggy, poor soil, or mounds that were raised up in rows for drainage, and harvested mackerel and shellfish. So I guess something like that fish soup with potatoes and fish would have been a staple. But many of the crofters, it's very pretty, isn't it?
Mm. So it's tidal?
Yes. I think so. Well, some of those lochs didn't seem to be open to the sea, though. Many of the crofters from the islands emigrated to Canada and Australia when they were forced off the land by the landowners who wanted to run sheep. And some moved to this side of the island where, as you saw, it was very poor soil, and the farming was really hard. There's a lot of remains of stone cottages, black houses as they were called, scattered throughout the island. As I said, we had our car, so we circumnavigated our end of the island. So we went around this path. We were staying here. First day we just drove around there, but we ended up going up to Lewis and driving around there. So as you can see, the beaches on the western side are quite nice.
Right.
Coffee. Sorry, yes?
Sorry.
Did you have a question, Anne?
No, I'm just saying I'm back. Computer crashed.
Sorry. We had a coffee. The best coffee I had in the UK, I had on the Isle of Harris at a cafe, but they had a sign up. Due to unforeseen circumstances, there'll be no lunch today. I don't know what happened. Lunch. It's just beautiful on this side. You can see the land slightly better. Now, I don't know, some of you might know what these sort of, there was quite a bit of this sort of land. This is it just a bog?
Yeah.
Is that sphagnum, do you think, or not? Something like?
Doesn't look like sphagnum.
Right.
And I don't think it would have been, because Australia, Tasmania, in fact, had a huge industry of sending sphagnum over to the UK early on. So if they'd been able to get it from closer, they would have done.
They would have. So we visited it. They still make tweed there, and it's not done in cottages, but it is done in large sheds, and it's still controlled. So it's hand woven on manual looms still. But apparently there are a lot of sheep running around the island, but apparently they import the wool from England. And they make, I'm not sure if they make some of the clothing there or the tweed's actually sent away for that. The museum is very interesting, the Tweed Museum. And finally, 2 days before we left, I bought some tweed there. I bought a length of this because I don't know what to make out of it though. I haven't used it yet. I'm not much of a sewer, so. We spotted 2 otters, or Arthur did, swimming towards the house. Now these photos are not good. I only had my phone. My camera broke before I got there. We went down and they climbed out and played on the seaweed. So we didn't want to get too close to them. So wishing I had a good camera. They're such playful little things.
How long did they stay out and play for?
Oh, maybe an hour.
Oh, really? Oh, how fantastic.
Yeah. Then we drove up to Lewis. It was really raining on the day we went to Lewis, and we visited a couple of historic sites. These are the standing stones of Callanish. It's very flat and featureless compared to Harris. Lewis was not anywhere near as pretty. The standing stones are stark and mysterious, and there's many theories about their purpose. No one seems to be really sure. Certainly they are thought-provoking when you wander around them. They were
They've definitely been put there, they're not left there.
They've been put there. There's a central, as you saw in that first picture, there's a little museum there.
Oh, yeah.
A central stone.
Yep.
They had all sorts of theories about the stone circle at the centre is called the Clachan Chalonais.
What kind of rock is it, Sanndra?
I don't know. It looks maybe a bit granity to me, you know. Don't know really. It's been suggested they were erected in the late Neolithic era and were a focus for rituals in the Bronze Age. They're near the village of Callanish, hence their name. It's been suggested that the stones were a prehistoric lunar observatory. Others have proposed a relationship between the stones, the moon, and the Clisham Range on Harris. But there are people who argue that the alignments can exist purely by chance. So in folklore, they say they're petrified giants who would not convert to Christianity. They got turned to stone.
Huh.
And another legend is that early on a midsummer morning, an entity known as the Shining One walks the length of the avenue, and his coming is heralded by the call of the cuckoo. So there's some stories around them. They're quite big. And that's the central piece.
That looks like Arthur's peeing behind that.
He isn't, but it doesn't look like he is. Like that when I looked up. Now, the interesting thing that I found, there's a little museum near there. Maybe it was in the town, I can't remember now. But all these historic sites, you can just wander around. There's no entrance fee or anybody there. You know, you can just go there and wander around. That's a photo from the museum. And the next thing we visited was a little tiny reconstructed village of black houses. This is a term which was used to describe the stone farmhouses that the crofters lived in on Harris and Lewis. Some were lived in up until the 1960s, and they did have a more modern interpretation of one there. They're very low stone buildings. You wouldn't want to be tall, with a thatched roof, using string made from heather. The roof has a net over it held down by rocks, and the double stone walls are hollow and filled in with peat. The roof sits on the peat, which soaks up the rain, and I think they have a fair bit of rain, maintaining a good seal between the two stone walls. Inside, a constant peat fire burns. There are no chimneys. And the interior is dark and smoky, hence the name Black House, as in the black, The animals lived in them in the winter, and the beds were set back in alcoves. They were apparently warm, but I don't know whether I'd fancy living with all that smoke. So they had a peat fire burning in the middle, under the kettle of this house. No chimney. We did have a chimney in our renovated one, thank goodness. So that's what I mean. Our bed was like that as well at the cottage we stayed in, set back in an alcove.
Oh, right. So the cows wouldn't climb into it.
Well, I think it's also a bit of a Scandinavian hangover, because I noticed in some Scandinavian houses they have beds in alcoves like that. But also, Reese, I think you keep you warm if you pull the curtains.
Oh, yeah.
And as I said before, I quite like the smell of the peat burning. That was near where the houses were. Then we visited a Norse mill, a reconstructed Norse mill, reconstructed on the site where it was. We got drenched going here because it was 500 metres from the road and it rained. It's on the western coast of the Isle of Lewis. There's a mill and a kiln here, and they were built during the Iron Age, used for drying and grinding barley into meal, and the mill was powered by a stream flowing out of the Loch Ranavot. I thought I had a picture of the stream, but apparently not.
Could you go into those buildings or not?
Yeah, and there was no one there. You could just wander around. That's what I mean. It had the old... my photos have got mucked up, I think, because I did have a picture of the millstone. There it is. Wow. That's in the centre. So they reached by a short path about 500 yards, whatever that is, in metres. Now I can't remember. It's very dark inside. Now, the rebuilding of the cottages was started by primary school children, local school children, and completed by the Norse Mill Society. And it offers a glimpse into Scandinavian history on the life of Lewis. Because these were unchanged, but there's the stream running past there.
So did it have a water wheel, or what was when it said powered by it, what was the power?
Well, I'm not really sure, because it was sort of, I didn't see a wheel in the stream, but it must have had. I mean, I don't know how else it would go. We did a circuit through the capital of Stornoway. On the way back, we were hoping to get a coffee, but we could get fish and chips, but we couldn't get coffee. It was very, very wet.
I wonder what the thatching was, because it's just a reed or something.
It looks like a reed, doesn't it?
Mm.
It'd be a local reed, because I had to use something local. Stornoway was a reasonable size. So any questions on that? Okay, we'll move on then. By contrast, this island was not rainy at all. This was Sholta. And once again, we didn't cruise to this. We went by ferry with our car. The population is 2,796 people. It's just off the coast of Split, and reached by ferry runs back and forwards a few times a day. It's a car ferry. It's got strong links to Australia because a lot of the people emigrated from the island and sent money back to support the people there. We were welcomed on the, you can see there where it is in there. Welcome to the island. There's the ferry coming across. This was what met us at our Airbnb. The Croatians have a culture of providing food and drink for guests in their houses, and they're so hospitable. Now, but you need to be warned about their homemade plum vodka, Slivovic, and their apricot rakia, because they're apparently between 40 and 80% proof, and they insist that you have shot after shot of it. Although one place we stayed on the mainland, she did make sure we weren't intending to drive. But all of this food here is from the island. The olives, the olive oil that Davos, the host, grows, the cheese. I'm not sure about the cheese actually, but the anchovies certainly, and the homemade vodka. I wasn't very well. We went there in October. I wasn't very well when we got there. I'd had a few little problems, and the host texted me and said, it's got a very, you'll be healing properties, the dense pine forest, the minerals from the seeds, an ideal combination. Just have easy walks and lots of rest. I actually felt totally rejuvenated by the time we left there. There was a local cheese, but I'm not sure from the island. Now, this was our view from our cottage of Stromorska, which is the biggest town on Sholta. And this is where we stayed here, these two floors of this apartment cottage, and this barbecue area was also ours to use. It was, that's the barbecue area, just beautiful. And it had a fire in one end. And that's our cottage. I just loved it there. I've said that about everywhere, really, haven't I?
Yeah, except for one, yes.
The houses are built out of a local light limestone with terracotta roofs. The history dates back to Neolithic times with connections, legends connected to the, how are we going for time? I should have been checking.
It's 11:15, so you've only got one more island to go, haven't you? Or two?
Okay, but I can just do one.
No, that's good.
Okay. Am I talking too much?
No, it's good. Keep going.
Okay, so the legend is that the Queen Tweetha had a castle above the Senchka Bay, and its ramparts can still be seen. We did go looking for them, but I couldn't find them. It was a place where they said you could find inner peace and strength. And the Roman Emperor Diocletian used to holiday here, and there are Roman remains under the sea. So the Croats, the Romans, the Illyrians blended together. Christianity came to the island, and it got attacked regularly by pirates, who on one occasion burnt the church. Fortresses were built when the Venetians were battling with the Turks. In 1905, Sholta farmers purchased the island from the Splits nobility, but they had a 25-year contract and a very heavy debt. Then the vine disease came, and this motivated intensive immigration from the end of the 19th century, and the remaining islanders, with the help of these immigrant families, paid off the debt and built the infrastructure. There was more immigration, 2 world wars, and in fact, in the Second World War, the entire island was evacuated. In 1962, the island was once more brought under the Split municipality and stagnated until the Civil War in 1993. So there's a few disused stone buildings on the island, but they are working to rejuvenate, have been working since then to rejuvenate agriculture and tourism. We were there in October. I think we were lucky because I think there's quite a few holiday makers there in peak season. And it was pretty quiet when we were there. It's just, we wandered into this bay on one of our travels about the place. So it's survived despite all the upheaval, and the children of the immigrants have strong connections to the island. So it's got pockets of habitation, but it's mostly covered in small pines, which you see on the hillside there. Olive and fig trees and a few vineyards in a seemingly random and haphazard manner. There's wild rosemary and other herbs, and they make a local honey called, forget now. Oh no, that's olive. And we swam every day in the ocean in front of our cottage. Incredibly clear water.
Yeah, it's so clear. It looks like those boats are above it, doesn't it? Not many people around, Sanndra, or did you manage to get photos without people?
There were nobody around, really. There wasn't anybody around when I was taking these photos. There weren't hardly any tourists there at all. And I think there are, though, in peak season, because the local honey is known as a lintio, and it's known for its healing properties since ancient times. The wine produced on the island is called Debrici, and the Zinfandel, it's a parent of Zinfandel, dark red purple wine. They've been revitalising that since 2005. And there are small green figs growing there, but they're not like the figs we have here. So that you can see there's some olive trees and there are fences, but it all looks a bit haphazard. You can see Split, it's not very far away. And the roads, a lot of the roads are like this. We set out to taste and explore. So we went out to visit some farms with tasting. We went to the Castleknock Sholter Winery, tasted the local wine, met the grower and winemaker, and we also bought a bottle of his herbal grappa, which you're welcome to come and have a shot of because I can never get anyone to have more than one. It is and we still have some left. They only sell from the cellar door, so I'm preciously guarding the couple of bottles of wine we brought back with us. We haven't eaten, drunk them yet. Then we tasted the honey, which was very nice. Not as nice as some of that I had on the Croatian mainland. But the best olive oil we had was made by Davros, our host. But they'd had a bit of a poor year and he didn't have enough to sell. We did go to an olive farm, and when the young adolescent who was running it decided he'd drag himself off his mobile phone to service, we did buy some. As I said, it was the end of the season, and the honey lady said, you know, we don't usually get tourists this late, and I think they really appreciated having the time to themselves. You know what I mean? So they weren't that keen on having other tourists around. But it was the best time for us to be there. Before we left the island, our hosts invited us to a barbecue and cooked us beautiful fish, which he wouldn't let us use a knife and fork. He's too beautiful. He's put his olive oil all over. Too beautiful to eat with a knife and fork. You have to eat it with your fingers. So I just have a little message from him.
Hello, everybody for Tasmania, of Sultan Croatia.
They were very nice people, really nice people. I mean, he spoke a bit of English. She spoke none. We don't speak any Croatian, but we had a really good time. So it didn't seem to really matter. Any questions on that? I hope I'm not taking too much time.
Were was that autumn there? Autumn, Sandra? What when you say it wasn't?
Yeah,
on the
autumn.
main trip? Yeah.
Yeah.
Autumn.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to say this is fantastic and keep going. And just because we're not asking questions doesn't mean we don't think it's fantastic. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now the next island I didn't like so much, and this is a Dutch island, Aruba, quite small, and it's off the coast of Venezuela in the Caribbean, so it's here. The population is 106,000, and it's in what they call the Dutch Caribbean. It's 32 kilometres from Venezuela. It has no fresh water, no arable land. All the water is desalinized and seawater, and all the food and supplies are imported. There's not even a fishing industry. I'm really not sure why people settled here, but apparently the Dutch use it as a slave exchange place and used to trade horses from there. I don't know if they bred them there. It was once a Dutch territory. It's now autonomous, but retains some of the Dutch culture. I thought it had, the only things going for it was probably the tropical climate and the white beaches on the other side. So it's primarily a tourist destination. They do grow, sorry?
Sanndra, when you say autonomous, do you mean autonomous government and
yes,
structures, public structures and so on? So how did, with nothing to say for itself in terms of industry, how do they support the?
I think it's tourist industry, Joe. I think there's lots of high-rise resorts, hotels, and it must just be that because there isn't anything else there. It's
so in terms of affording the desalination plants and all of that infrastructure, it does seem a bit.
I know. Maybe the Dutch still support them. I don't know, in some way. They do grow aloe vera commercially. That was started in 1890, but there's not a lot of that happening. That's to boost the economy, but I don't know if it does much really. Yeah, it was dry, windy, soulless and flat and very expensive. We did a tour, a local tour in an open bus. I mean, it was massive high resorts, every conceivable fast food outlet you can imagine, and huge shopping malls. That's what the most part of it was in the town. But when you got out of the town, we saw lots of arid vegetation. And we went to a sort of, we went to the aloe vera plantation and got to see how they process it, which is done in a factory. They actually sell their products for burn treatment in war zones, apparently. I mean, they sell it commercially overseas. They had one cashew tree on the island and one cow called Boo. Now, there are no large land mammals, but there is a lot of lizards apparently and geckos, as well as dozens of species of birds. There is a small swampy area which is a bird sanctuary, which I found out about after we left because we didn't go there on our little bus trip. It has 100 species of birds, land and sea birds, but a lot of them are migratory between South and North America.
Sounds good.
And they have brown pelicans and lots of seabirds. Apparently it's quite good for snorkeling. Now, it's not a stereotypical tropical island of lush, steamy forests, but it has some, this very interesting tree that only Aruba, Bonaire and Curacao, did I say that right? It only grows, and it's called the dibby tree. It's never more than a dozen or 50 feet tall and permanently bent at nearly a right angle.
Wow.
It's swept back by the wind, and all dibby trees point to the west in the direction of the trade winds that come from the northeast. There's lots of cacti everywhere. They're a fascinating tree, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we went to this little, sorry, Cole.
No, you're right. I just said very interesting, the whole thing.
We went to this arid desert sort of park, little sort of like a botanic gardens of different cacti and rocks, which was interesting. I mean, and the thing that I found interesting, I did do some research, was the original inhabitants of Aruba, although I don't know how they survive without fresh water, but they were from the Arawak tribe and they were Quechua Indians, and apparently they were very tall. And the Spanish called it land of the giants because the people were very tall. There are still descendants apparently on the island. The thing that Aruba is struggling with, then we went back down to the town to the beach for a swim and had lunch at a beach bar where everything was so expensive. I mean, the other thing about the cruise ships, often people on land see you coming. It's good if you can not let them know you're off a cruise boat, actually. So that it was a bit hard on this island, but sometimes you can, because they charge you more money for things. The problem they're having is that there's a lot of refugees from Venezuela, and they're coming over. They estimate there's probably thousands of undocumented Venezuelans on the islands, and they feel that they can't really take much more. They had, in 2 months, 200 asylum applications from Venezuela, and that wasn't that recent. And things have escalated, I think, and got worse there. And they would come in illegally on boats. It's very close. So we swam in the sea and had a $11 beer. And beautiful swimming water. And went back to Oranjestad, I'm not sure, which was the town. We thought we might do some shopping, but it was Sunday and everything was shut. The souvenirs were tacky, cheap, horrible stuff, or ridiculously overpriced. They weren't actually cheap. It's not a place I'd really visit again. This horse, there are a number of these blue horse statues around the island apparently, and they represent the horse trading that was once something that took place on the island. Any questions? I only have one island to go. Oh no.
Can you just go back to the previous slide? I'm just looking at that shopping mall. That could be anywhere in the world, including Burnie.
Yep,
really, with those right. shops.
It had no soul, you know. It didn't have anything you could say. You're right. You could be anywhere, Joe. Really. I don't know why people would even really want a holiday there, to be honest. Now, Reese, I'm just wondering, I've got the Canary Island and the Thousand Islands, and if there's not time for both, would we choose one or?
I think there's time for both. If people can leave if they need to leave, Sandra. I think most of us would like to see both of those islands. Is that mutual, everybody? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Keep it going. Keep it rolling.
People will leave if they need to, Sanndra.
Okay. So once again, on our trip to Europe in 2018, we went to Gran Canaria, and the city was Las Palmas, which is the Spanish Canary Islands, which are here, and they're Spanish. So here, I'm sorry, none of that, ignore that one. I think that's wrong. It's a population of 2 million people, lots of high-rise hotels and tourist activities, part of Spain, and has a fascinating history of European influence in the architecture of the old town. But unlike Aruba, I liked this place. I thought it was nice. It was very European. I liked the architecture. I liked the food. It's been a stopover for shipping and famous explorers who went out discovering new lands, and brave as they were, did lead to the exploitation and sometimes demise of Indigenous peoples. There were 2 fascinating museums, and which made reference to these Indigenous people. Don't know why my computer's doing that. The original inhabitants of Canaria were defeated by the Spanish and almost annihilated. But contrary to popular belief, many current residents have what Guanche blood. So the Guanches were, this is in the museum, they had sophisticated agriculture and grain storage and were a fair-skinned race believed to come from North Africa. I thought the museum was doing a good job of educating people, but I'm not really sure about the ethics of displaying skulls and skeletons. The second museum was Casa de Colon, and it was an ornate former governor's house, and it was visited by Columbus, and it housed a museum on his voyage and ship life. What I couldn't believe was how small the ships were that they travelled in. Having been on a boat on the sea, it makes you really aware of how brave they were to go out in those small ships and go, and they didn't even know where they were going. There were crafts and artefacts from indigenous South American indigenous people, and they talked about them in the museum. We did a little bus trip around. This is sort of a residential area and a mural. Any questions on that? I would like to go back there for a holiday.
Why? What appealed?
Well, I don't think we got much chance to explore it, and I liked the food, and I liked it didn't have, although it has a lot of tourism, and I know a lot of English go there, I think, for holidays. I thought it had a nice feel to it, you know.
Mm-hmm. How long were you there? Just a full day again, or?
Just a day.
Yeah.
We had like a week or so in Shelter and Harris, but the rest of them were just a day.
Yeah.
The 1,000 Islands, now these islands are in Canada and they're not in the sea, they're actually in a river. We were driving along the St. Lawrence River towards Toronto, and we stayed a night at a B&B in Brockville, which is a riverside town. And the people that were English, and they'd converted it, and he told us about these ferry trip we could do out to these islands as a sort of a cruise trip, and so we decided we would do that. It was only a 2-hour trip. It was very pretty. Now these islands are so interesting though. They're little pine-studded islands. Some of them are very small, and they are on the border. The border between Canada and the USA runs through the islands, and the islands are dotted with holiday houses and sometimes mansions, or in most cases, I thought, from rich Americans. And the 1,000 Islands is actually the inspiration for the salad dressing of the same name. In 1900, George Bolt, built a castle. They're gorgeous, aren't they?
Mm.
They're cute.
So is this, you're on a...
hand on it, look. Pardon?
Are you on a commercial ferry here, or a little boat you've got yourselves?
Commercial.
Oh, okay.
I have a little story about that.
Yeah.
When I was staying in, I was traveling all over USA and Canada, and friends stayed at this cabin on the USA side for the 4th of July. All the people along the river would take out their fireworks to a little island, one of these islands, and we'd all come back, and they let someone there stayed and let all these fireworks off for everybody around. So you'd hear ooh and ah from all over the river. It's great.
It's pretty there, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's no waves or tides or anything, because the houses are built right.
Yeah, I know, right? Look at that one.
Yeah.
Although when we stayed on the side of Lake Ontario, around that area, there was just like a beach. It was sandy and there were waves, but this was actually the river. So George Bolt built this castle on Hart Island, which apparently is shaped like a heart, for his wife Louise. It was designed as their summer dream home. However, it was not to be. Mrs. Bolt died suddenly just months before it was completed, and he was inconsolable and he never finished it, and it was vacant for over 70 years. But now you can actually stay there. He was actually the manager of the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and is accredited with saying the customer is always right and starting room service, apparently. But the death of his wife broke his heart.
That's an interesting photo because the person was really small. It looks like the whole thing is smaller than it really is. It's huge.
The castle?
Yeah, that one. No, the next, the one you just had. That's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-story building.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, 6, 4, 5.
There's a picture of the whole thing. I'm not sure about that building in front, whether that was built first or last or...
And what time of year are we looking at now, Sanndra? What time of year were you there?
About early September.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So really early autumn.
Yeah. I think that might be back on land, not sure. Back at where the ferry port was, not really sure. And there was wars here between the French, if anyone's interested in that. The Battle of Thousand Islands was an engagement fort, 1760, along the present-day Canada-United States border by the British and French forces. So, quite an interesting area there. And that's it, really.
Cool. Okay, we'll go stop sharing and we'll see if there's any questions. Okay, so does anybody got any questions or comments? Silence all round. It was fascinating.
It was fascinating, you know, and it's places that most tourists don't go. Well, no, most Australian tourists don't go anyway. So well done, Sanndra.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed it. It was, you know. Now, of course, I got that. Having said I never had any motivation to travel. Once I'd been that, now I don't want to be home, and I want to go all the time, and I don't know how I'm going to manage now.
What does Arthur reckon about that?
He doesn't want to go away for as long. See, we went for a year last time, and I think that was great. I think if it takes you 6 weeks to get somewhere, you need to stay for a while.
Yeah.
And but he said he thinks 6 to 9 months is enough. Might be able to eke him out to 9 months, but I don't know when we'll be able to ever go again, or whether I'll feel safe to go, or whether I want to go by boat, or I don't know now.
The risk of being locked away from home, like you're saying, Billy worries about. I think that's a real risk wherever you go. I loved the way you had those islands so different, Sanndra. That to me was a really great thing. That, you know, from the Scottish islands, just so utterly different to the Caribbean ones.
I know, and to Reunion.
Yeah.
Mm. I think Shoals was one of my favourite places we stayed, because I mean, the whole of Croatia is beautiful if you avoid Dubrovnik, really. I mean, you probably need to go there once and see it, but we went up to the Plitvice Lakes, the national park. It's absolutely stunning up there.
Mm, mm.
I can never help saying something geological. And Sanndra, I forgot while you're talking about the Azores, I was too absorbed in it, but the Azores are one of the few examples on our Earth of a mountain that it is actually an underwater mountain that's emerged above sea level. It's one of the volcanic mountains of the mid-ocean ridge, just like Iceland, and Macquarie Island is a remnant one. But yeah, that's the volcanic history to the Azores.
So do you think it will erupt, Joe? Like, is that on the card?
Oh, well, it looked, like Reece said, it looked to me like it was a fairly active looking place. No, I don't know that. All I know is that what we're seeing there is a bit of the mid-ocean floor coming to the surface.
Ah, fascinating.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And thanks a lot, Sanndra. It was great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was absolutely marvellous.
And
great.
we'll
Thank you.
see many of you next week.
You've covered a lot of ground, but you've opened up a wider horizon for yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sanndra. Lovely to see places I've never been.